Rita, thank you so much for taking the time to join the internal communication series that I run. This is a thought leadership series with practitioners from around the globe. There are close to 35 plus who have participated in this. Really delighted to have you on the show. Before we begin, it would be great if you could introduce yourself to our viewers.
Hi, so thank you so much for inviting. So I'm Anurita Saxena, currently leading corporate communications for AXA Business Services. I'm based out of Pune. Our offices are based out of Pune and Bangalore. I did my bachelor's in electronics and telecommunications engineering, and after that I went to join Cisco as a software engineer, and that did not work well for me because I can't be a techie. That's just not me at all. So that's when after a year, I decided I wanted to pursue my MBA, and I did that in marketing. And I think like a lot of other people, I was also like, huh, maybe sales is the calling. I don't even know. So I mean, I'll figure out on the way. And then communications happened. And
Right.
since then, there was no looking back. I have worked with the SKF, I have worked with Vodafone, currently with AXA, and I've also headed the marketing communications wing for a startup for about 2 years here in Pune. So yes, that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. I like the journey and the progression and the fact that you've been a techie, but you kind of progressed in comms. So it's fantastic. It's a great mix to have, especially in a world like this. So let's begin by asking you the first question. So what does internal communication mean to you? What's your definition of it?
Internal communications, I believe, is the thread, is the glue that comes completes the whole organization and keeps it all together. So,
Fantastic.
I mean, it's just not the communications team, but who is not doing internal communications? Even two colleagues talking to each other are doing this sort of internal communications in some way. I
Right.
think what we bring to the table is making it more structured and making it more hands-on and essential. And
Right.
definitely in the recent years, in the past few years, we have seen internal communication emerge as a very, very strategic tool where
Mm.
leadership is really leveraging it out to harness the potential of its employees, to keep the employees also engaged to the organization. And we are seeing it evolving in myriad fashions. I think it's only going to go up from there. So that's what it means to me.
Fantastic. And how does it get practiced in your organization? What are some of the nuances, some of the channels, some of the process or structures around it?
So at AXA Business Services, we are really focused on our employees. So,
Mm.
like I said, our business model is that we service our partner entities who are
Mm.
other AXA group companies across the globe,
Right.
and with that, it becomes very essential for us to keep the talent pool very intact, to keep the employees engaged,
Mm.
motivated, and connected at all times. So at AXA, we manage it using all the channels possible, which is traditional as well as digital at this point of time.
Got
So
it.
what we do is we are using emailers, we are using our internal portals, we are using WhatsApp, town halls, smaller
Wow.
group meetings, larger group meetings, that even the traditional print ways of posters and pamphlets, etc. So we are trying to do everything,
Mm.
and since the world has changed for everyone in the last couple of months, we are
Mm.
of course heavily dependent on digital, and that's where the progression naturally is going to continue on.
Right.
But that is what we're doing. We are trying to do everything, and we're trying to see that what is actually situationally making sense at
Mm.
that point of time. So that's
Got
how
it.
we do it at AXA right now.
Fantastic. And in your experience, and if you could share one example or a campaign that you are really personally proud of, where you looked at the challenge, you looked at the opportunity, what is the solution you came up with, what are some of the ways in which you measured it? If you could share some examples.
Sure. So, when the lockdown happened, it wasn't easy for anyone. And while a lot of us were, and I would say us because I was one of them, while a lot of us were thinking that, oh, this is a temporary phase, there are
Mm.
diseases, we've seen swine flu, we've seen
Mm.
dengue, etc. So, we have seen all of that coming and going in much
Mm.
shorter span. So we said, okay,
Mm.
maybe for 15 days. Okay, so
Mm.
then 15 days went, and then we said, okay, maybe next 15 days we'll get back to office.
Mm.
And so there was a sense of denial which kind of existed amongst a lot of us, and not only the organization. I'm even talking about people at large, our friends, etc. So everybody said
Right.
that yeah, it'll pass, right? And which is what we say now as well. But as the seriousness of the situation increased, we started to see that this is probably going to last. And that is where came the concept of the new normal, changing our lifestyle, being more dependent on the essentials, etc. So we started to see that people are operating in different situations. Some people are operating in larger families, so they have a great family support, so the house is taken care of while they just have to focus on work from home. Some people are really struggling to put their children into virtual classes, whereas managing the housework and the household house domestic help also not being around, people are trying to manage that. Some people who've been staying alone, so I mean a lot of our Gen Y, which is staying alone out there, and did not have the chance to really go back because nobody was expecting lockdown to come over to the country so much. So then we said it's important that we keep the lines of communication on by doing this wellness campaign. And we did not exactly say that, okay, this is something that we're going to talk about, but we learned over the journey. So we said, okay, number one, physical wellness. How do you keep yourself? You take breaks, you get up from your seat, do a little bit of stuff. So you log down, but don't like completely break off your physical wellness schedule. And from there, we saw that there's a requirement for mental wellness, which is also there. And then smaller things like tips and tricks about working from home. Many a times you don't have a lot of people don't have the right infrastructure to work. Not everybody would have a chair and a table which is ergonomically designed, because you're predominantly not prepared to work from home for such long durations. So your neck is paining. So these small nuances. Then for managers, we ran a special campaign because typically when your team is sitting in front of you, you know how occupied they are, or how not occupied they are. But managers now have the additional responsibility of managing things from a distance, which meant that they needed to ensure that the teams are engaged, teams are motivated, whatever they're saying gets delivered in the right tone, because now people can't see each other or are not in person. So with managers, we had to put in those do's or don'ts of communication, do's and don'ts of reporting. We had to tell them that, guys, do not micromanage. Trust that everybody is going through a different spell, and all of that individuals are also grappling. So therefore, our responsibility increases much more. I think that is something that the organization really found value in. And that's something we're doing now also. We call this campaign as the Positive Work Connect, where we say that, let's keep the positivity on in whatever situation we are. And yeah, so I think that is one campaign that has really worked for us in the recent past.
Fantastic. That's a great initiative, and I'm sure it must have been well received. So, what according to you, is the biggest challenge that you feel internal communicators face today?
Um, by nature of communication, and this is just not internal, because I come from a experience where I have quite a few years of external communications also with me. I think by nature of communications, people are full of ideas when it comes to how to communicate, and that can be with anybody. That can be with media, communities, customers, employees. With internal communications, it becomes a little more, which is what my experience has told me. And that becomes more because they're like, we know our teams, right? So we know what we want, so just deliver us that much. Sometimes people are not ready to do the whole risk mitigation and cross the whole barrier. So they say, no, I want this written, and this is what needs to be communicated in this manner, and I will do it over phone, just give me a script. But it's not just doing over phone. You have to understand that the tone has to be different. You have to understand, if you were saying the same thing, are the other leaders also saying the same thing or not? Because people are networked in an organization. So I think the biggest challenge that we face is that people need to be a little more patient, because risk mitigation is something which is very heavy for us in communications. So I think that is one challenge. And with people being such seasoned communicators, the fraternity growing, the value increasing that communication brings in, I think that is slowly changing. So that
Great.
works.
That's a great point. And related to that, what do you think is the opportunity you see?
I think the opportunity that I see primarily is how we amalgamate ourselves with the changing tools which are there. So there are just so many things, and I keep talking to my friends and relatives who are working otherwise in other organizations. Some of them are on still Skype. Some of them will work on Zoom, and then suddenly there'll be a buzz saying, "Oh, Zoom is not right from the data protection standpoint." So then organizations are looking at other media. So I think from a communication standpoint, we really need to see that all the channels for communication, what do they have, where do they kind of fit in, and how do we leverage them, given that now technology is going to be more important than it was a quarter back or 6 months back. I think that is where the opportunity lies for us to really put this right message on the right channel, using the right technology so that it has the right impact.
Fantastic. Great, really great point. And you are hitting on the right notes because this is the opportunity right now in front of us also. So, there's this thought that, intern comms really doesn't add much value. You don't really get a seat at the table. People don't see this as important. So, what are your tips and, suggestions on how can internal communicators add more value to the business?
You're right. And we've seen, I think a larger part of the community must have seen this. When I started my career as a management trainee in communications, way back, it's 9.5 years now. So way back then, yes, of course. And communications budgets are like the first to be slashed. Also, many a time that, oh, no, 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 we can defer this project to next year or next quarter, and then that sometimes doesn't come. So I think the value continuously lies, and that is the beauty of this particular function also. Immediate
Mm,
feedback.
mm,
So this is my biggest shift that I saw when I moved from external to internal, and I saw that whenever you do things for customers, it may not get the immediate feedback or a reaction as much as you see that in internal comms. And the beauty of that is also that you are not only the creator of the communication, you're even the recipient of that.
mm,
So from an employee dimension also, that kind of touches you. It's just
mm.
not one way that you're doing. So
Right.
I think the more we kind of try to empathize and put ourselves in the position and see that what an employee wants and what is going to keep them engaged at this
Mm,
point of time, when we talk, if we keep harping upon performance, 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 that's
mm.
probably going to disengage them. But if we're
Right.
going to talk about we are with you, we
Mm,
understand your challenges, take
mm,
it easy,
mm,
we're going to be with you. So I
mm,
think that is something that's going to make the difference. That is something, if you harp upon the employee feedback that comes in and able to show the management that this is the difference that we're kind of making in the
mm,
entire organization, that
mm.
is going to be a certain win for us.
Great. And related to that, so therefore, what kind of skills do you think are important for internal communicators to have or develop?
One, I said technology, so I will not
Mm,
repeat on that. We need to know what is going
mm,
on.
mm.
The other thing, I think storytelling.
Correct.
Storytelling has always been an eternal part. Internal, I
Mm,
think, is the wrong word. Eternal part of our
mm.
jobs. And I
Right.
think now we have to be more cognizant of the fact that how the story is landing,
Right.
how is it being received. So therefore, we have to really wear all the hats and think
Mm,
that whatever we are saying is going to
yeah.
get perceived by, in a similar way by millennial, Gen Y, Gen Z, everyone,
Mm,
by people's families also, because now they're seeing so much in their families. So something that you send out has an immediate reaction which a family member is perceiving.
right.
So and that can come out then on social media, etc. So we
Mm,
really have to
mm,
be cognizant about how our story is landing. And I think
mm,
networking,
mm,
communicators typically are more receptive about networking. I
mm,
think now in the recent past, I've started to see people talk a little bit more about their vulnerabilities also that their
mm.
organization is going through, which I think is amazing because that kind of builds in the trust in the community that, oh, everybody is in the same boat. And that
Right.
collective power is able to generate better ideas that are then individually able to help organizations. So I
Right.
think technology, storytelling, as well as improved networking is
Mm.
something that is going to be vital to us.
Fantastic. And I like the part about, sharing your vulnerability because that builds trust. I think that's a great point you talked about. Now, there are a lot of youngsters who want to join this domain. So what's your advice for youngsters who want to make a mark in internal communication?
There hasn't been a better time to join this field, I believe, because the pandemic has really changed the landscape in which a lot of functions are operating, and one of them is definitely internal communications. So
Mm,
management is more receptive to the ideas, organizations are more receptive to the idea of experimenting, either succeeding and therefore replicating, or failing and learning from it fast. So I think
right.
now is a great time to join communications. It's
Mm,
important to keep your eye on the goal. It's
mm,
important that you share the vision that the management shares. Yes,
mm,
many a times we may not be able to comprehend it in the best way possible, and
mm,
therefore we'll need a little bit of patience. So
mm,
this is what I've learned across the years, that many a times your opinion may not be understood, and you have to
mm.
go by somebody's opinion trusting that they know better. You may
Right.
not understand it immediately, but in the due course of time you will.
Mm.
So have that patience, have that zeal to do something new.
Mm. Mm.
Creativity has always been valued in our field and will continue to be valued.
Right.
Use the latest tools which are there, and I
Mm.
think we'll be able to really, really make a difference. You will be able to really make a difference. Organizations are looking at younger talent to kind of come in, and communications is not rocket science.
Mm.
So
Mm.
therefore, it's a field where a person can have fun and
Mm.
really challenge themselves at the same time. It is not
Mm.
that draining. So I think that is a good mix that this field brings in.
Fantastic. And related to that, I asked all the women leaders, so from your perspective as a women leader, what's your advice to other women professionals who are probably in this, in this domain? What can they do to do things differently or get better at what they do?
This is strictly my personal opinion, just like
Yeah.
everything else I spoke about. But I think in communications, patriarchy does not exist.
Mm.
So, there is a lot of acceptance of women being in this field. I
Mm.
think we bring in a biological advantage, if
Mm.
nothing else.
Mm.
So, the ability to listen, the ability
Mm.
to empathize,
Right.
the ability to then, once you've heard, be soaked in the situation, but able to get out of this and
Mm.
then look at it from a third party neutral perspective is
Mm.
something that women bring. And
Mm.
I believe, and I've worked with some really amazing women leaders who
Mm.
have been in communications and otherwise. And I think
Right.
I strongly believe that that ability really brings out a lot of value in what we are able to add as communicators.
Got it.
So, honestly, I don't have much to advise women in this particular field. I think we are doing well and
Mm.
we are valued, we are heard in this
Mm.
particular domain. So, yeah, it seems good for us.
Okay, fantastic. And so, you mentioned about, the pandemic and how things are changing. What's your sense of what's going to change in internal communication going forward because of all this, what's happening in the environment?
What will I change in internal communications? Nothing that I want to change per se, to be honest
Mm.
with you. So whatever I said, I think we should just do more of that. We will always have to look at what value we're
Mm.
bringing to the table.
Mm.
We'll always have to look at whether what we're saying is making sense. And
Right.
given the fact that organizations are also, trying to establish their ground in these new
Mm.
shaky grounds at this point of time.
Right.
uh, Organizations are trying to see what is going to work for them. They're going
Right.
to see that what is going to work for their employees best, etc.
Mm.
Be an
Mm.
employee. Be
Mm.
an employee before we actually go ahead and tell a solution to an
Mm.
employee. Let's be an employee and see how it is kind of working out for us. I think
Right.
if we're able to wear that hat in the best possible way, and that will come out easily because we all are employees
Mm.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think if we're able to do that, then we're able to really bring in the value. We're able to add
Mm.
in the value. Let's continue to empathize. Let's continue to bring in that value by being the
Mm.
employee, being the recipient of the communication.
Right.
And yeah, I think it works for us then.
And as we wrap up, what's your one? Is there any one trend that comes to your mind about what's happening or what you spot right now in the domain?
Um, the trend that I see is, yes, organizations being more open and transparent about the way in which they're communicating internally. So it's
Mm.
not like, oh, I will do something in my silo, but I don't want to share it with the community. And that's
Mm.
not happening. People are sharing, people
Mm.
are coming out and talking about their success stories. So I
Mm.
think that is one trend that is going to continue. We are learning more and more from organizations on how they are able to harpen the technology better to really
Mm.
percolate and penetrate further in the organization. That is
Mm.
something that is happening, and that is there to stay. It's a really, really helpful trend because it's really this learning mindset that is
Mm.
able to drive a change which
Mm.
communications need to drive in our respective organizations and the fraternity at large.
Got it. This has been brilliant. I mean, excellent insights. I really loved the conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much. Lovely chatting with you as well.